Chapter 12 of Lorna Doone. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Michelle Harris. Lorna Doone by R.D. Blackmore. Chapter 12. A Man Justly Popular. Now although Mr. Faggus was so clever and generous and celebrated, I know not whether, upon the whole, we were rather proud of him as a member of our family, or inclined to be ashamed of him. And indeed I think that the sway of the balance hung upon the company we were in. For instance, with the boys at Brendon, for there is no village at Oare, I was exceeding proud to talk of him, and would freely brag of my cousin Tom. But with the rich parsons of the neighbourhood, or the justices, who came round now and then, and were glad to ride up to a warm farmhouse, or even the well-to-do tradesmen of Porlock, in a word, any settled power which was afraid of losing things, with all of them we were very shy of claiming our kinship to that great outlaw. And sure, I should pity as well as condemn him, though our ways in the world were so different, knowing as I do his story, which knowledge, methinks, would often lead us to let alone God's prerogative, judgment, and hold by man's privilege, pity. Not that I would find excuse for Tom's downright dishonesty, which was beyond doubt a disgrace to him, and no credit to his kinfolk; only that it came about without his meaning any harm, or seeing how he took to wrong, yet gradually knowing it. And now, to save any further trouble, and to meet those who disparage him, without allowance for the time or the crosses laid upon him, I will tell the history of him, just as if he were not my cousin, and hoping to be heeded. And I defy any man to say that a word of this is either false, or in any way coloured by family. Much cause he had to be harsh with the world, and yet all acknowledged him very pleasant when a man gave up his money. And often he paid the toll for the carriage coming after him, because he had emptied their pockets, and would not add inconvenience. By trade he had been a blacksmith, in the town of Northmolton in Devonshire, a rough rude place at the end of Exmoor, so that many people marvelled if such a man was bred there. Not only could he read and write, but he had solid substance, a piece of land worth £100, and right of common for 200 sheep, and 1.5 of beasts, lifting up or lying down. And being left an orphan, with all these cares upon him, he began to work right early, and made such a fame at the shoeing of horses, that the farriers of Barham were like to lose their custom. And indeed he won a golden Jacobus for the best shod nag in the north of Devon, and some say that he never was forgiven. As to that I know no more, except that men are jealous. But whether it were that or not, he fell into bitter trouble within a month of his victory, when his trade was growing upon him, and his sweetheart ready to marry him. For he loved a maid of Southmolton, a courier's daughter I think she was, and her name was Betsy Paramore, and her father had given consent. And Tom Faggus, wishing to look his best, and be clean of course, had a tailor at work upstairs for him, who had come all the way from Exeter. And Betsy's things were ready too, for which they accused him afterwards, as if he could help that, when suddenly like a thunderbolt, a lawyer's writ fell upon him. This was the beginning of a lawsuit with Sir Robert Bampfylde, a gentleman of the neighbourhood, who tried to oust him from his common, and drove his cattle, and harassed them. And by that suit of law poor Tom was ruined altogether, for Sir Robert could pay for much swearing, and then all his goods and his farm were sold up, and even his smithery taken. But he saddled his horse before they could catch him, and rode away to Southmolton, looking more like a madman than a good farrier, as the people said who saw him. But when he arrived there, instead of comfort, they showed him the face of the door alone; for the news of his loss was before him, and Master Paramore was a sound, prudent man, and a high member of the town council. It is said that they even gave him notice to pay for Betsy's wedding clothes, now that he was too poor to marry her. This may be false, and indeed I doubt it; in the first place, because Southmolton is a busy place for talking, and in the next, that I do not think the action would have lain at law, especially as the maid lost nothing, but used it all for her wedding next month with Dick Vellicott of Mockham. All this was very sore upon Tom, and he took it to heart so grievously that he said, as a better man might have said, being loose of mind and property, "The world hath preyed on me like a wolf. God help me now to prey on the world." And in sooth it did seem for a while as if Providence were with him, for he took rare toll on the highway, and his name was soon as good as gold anywhere this side of Bristow. He studied his business by night and by day, with 3 horses all in hard work, until he had made a fine reputation. And then it was competent to him to rest, and he had plenty left for charity. And I ought to say for society too, for he truly loved high society, treating squires and noblemen, who much affected his company, to the very best fare of the hostel. And they say that once the king's justiciaries, being upon circuit, accepted his invitation, declaring merrily that if never true bill had been found against him, mine host should now be qualified to draw one. And so the landlords did, and he always paid them handsomely, so that all of them were kind to him, and contended for his visits. Let it be known in any township that Mr. Faggus was taking his leisure at the inn, and straightway all the men flocked thither to drink his health without outlay, and all the women to admire him, while the children were set at the crossroads to give warning of any officers. One of his earliest meetings was with Sir Robert Bampfylde himself, who was riding along the Barham road with only one serving man after him. Tom Faggus put a pistol to his head, being then obliged to be violent, through want of reputation, while the serving man pretended to be a long way round the corner. Then the baronet pulled out his purse, quite trembling in the hurry of his politeness. Tom took the purse, and his ring, and timepiece, and then handed them back with a very low bow, saying that it was against all usage for him to rob a robber. Then he turned to the unfaithful knave, and trounced him right well for his cowardice, and stripped him of all his property. But now Mr. Faggus kept only one horse, lest the government should steal them, and that one was the young mare Winnie. How he came by her he never would tell, but I think she was presented to him by a certain colonel, a lover of sport, and very clever in horseflesh, whose life Tom had saved from some gamblers. When I have added that Faggus as yet had never been guilty of bloodshed, for his eyes and the click of his pistol at first, and now his high reputation, made all his wishes respected, and that he never robbed a poor man, neither insulted a woman, but was very good to the church, and of hot patriotic opinions, and full of jest and jollity, I have said as much as is fair for him, and shown why he was so popular. Everybody cursed the Doones, who lived apart disdainfully, but all good people liked Mr. Faggus, when he had not robbed them, and many a poor sick man or woman blessed him for other people's money, and all the hostlers, stable boys, and tapsters entirely worshipped him. I have been rather long, and perhaps tedious, in my account of him, lest at any time hereafter his character should be misunderstood, and his good name disparaged; whereas he was my second cousin, and the lover of my—but let that bide. 'Tis a melancholy story. He came again about 3 months afterwards, in the beginning of the springtime, and brought me a beautiful new carbine, having learned my love of such things, and my great desire to shoot straight. But mother would not let me have the gun until he averred upon his honour that he had bought it honestly. And so he had, no doubt, so far as it is honest to buy with money acquired rampantly. Scarce could I stop to make my bullets in the mould which came along with it, but must be off to the Quarry Hill, and new target I had made there. And he taught me then how to ride bright Winnie, who was grown since I had seen her, but remembered me most kindly. After making much of Annie, who had a wondrous liking for him, and he said he was her godfather, but God knows how he could have been, unless they confirmed him precociously, away he went, and young Winnie's side shone like a cherry by candlelight. Now I feel that